Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for coming to the Water Conservation Showcase today. My name is Brendan McEnany. I am the Pacific Regional Director for U.S. Green Building Council. USGBC is one of the partners that puts on this event every year, which is now in its 15th year. Hard to believe. Yeah. We try to do it around World Water Day every year, which is Thursday this year. And the other partners that help put on this event besides USGBC are East Bay Municipal Utility District, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, the American Institute of Architects Committee on the Environment, and the PG&E Pacific Energy Center. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors for the showcase this year. Our platinum sponsors, Pacific Gas and Electric and the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. Our gold sponsors, Alameda County Waste Management Authority, or stopwaste.org. The silver sponsors, East Bay Municipal Utility District and Zone 7 Water Agency, and our certified sponsor, Contra Costa Water District. And I encourage you all to visit the 41 exhibitors we have here on this floor and then upstairs throughout the showcase today. The exhibit area will be closed at 6 p.m. I'm going to skip ahead here. I've got a whole list of announcements, so please bear with me. I will note that every year we get hundreds and hundreds of questions from stuff that we repeat before every single session, so we make a note to repeat for you. Some of it's for your safety and some of it's for learning purposes. The first one here to note, for those of you, we'll be sending materials out, presentations after the event. Once they're all uploaded, they'll be on the website, waterconservationshowcase.com. Everybody who attends will get an email letting you know when they're uploaded. If you need the continuing education hours before then, because it takes some time to get them all uploaded, you want to write this number down now for USGBC. Anybody who need this immediately for USGBC? Oh, sorry. Thanks, Will. And then there's also a number for AIA. So if you need it immediately, remember, you will get access to all these presentations. You can write this down later. So it's only like if your thing's due tomorrow, I know how that goes. You got to log on, self-report it. These qualify for CEU hours. So all the sessions you attend today can be used for that. So I'm going to leave this one up here as I go through some of the other notes. I skipped through the slide. Please share on social media things you're learning today. It's great to connect with your networks, and we want to spread the word to other folks who haven't been at the event before. Door prizes. So at 5:30 today, in the conference center next door, we'll have door prizes. Attendees who complete the premium passport card by visiting exhibitors, and that's available at the registration desk. You can be submitted for a drawing for some passport prizes. So every year, this is a great kind of fun way to end the event over in the conference center. Restrooms, first floor out by the yellow stair, and then second floor outside the lecture room along the wall to the right. Fire exits. So if you're here leaving this room, the quickest way is going to be out the front, the way you came in. There's another exit out the back if need be. In case of an earthquake, don't leave the building because of the threat of falling glass from outside. So under a desk or some of the other earthquake safety suggestions that you all know from being in California, but don't leave the building. If you do have to leave the building because of a fire, there's a carousel down at 4th and Howard, which is where we'll meet and decide whether it's safe to come back into the facility. Water dispensers, we have them throughout the Pacific Energy Center, so please hope you brought your refillable water bottles. Lunches, all important, can be picked up between 11:30 and 12:30. They're upstairs in the HVAC classroom. So once you pick up your lunch, you can eat it in any one of these classrooms or some of the other rooms that are made available. So please feel free to visit the exhibitors or move throughout the space with your lunch once you pick it up. Note, we compost all the biodegradable waste here at the Energy Center. So napkins, toothpicks, paper cups, the flatware, et cetera, should go into the compostables bin. Please silence your cell phones. This is the first year where we removed the words "and pagers" from that note. Beepers lost it a long time ago, so please silence your cell phones. And if you get a phone call, please take it outside of the room. These presentations are planned for 60 minutes. In this classroom, we added this feature last year where these are more intended to be kind of workshop style. So the other classrooms, they usually hold the questions to the end. We're going to try to do that here, but we're also hoping to have more of a dialogue with the presenters. They've got a lot to get through, so we want to get going. But we'll have more time for Q&A as these are structured to be more of a workshop with our expert presenters here. All right, I think that covers it. So to do a quick introduction for our two speakers, we have Will Bakx from Sonoma Compost. Will launched Bennett Valley Farm Compost in 1985. processing various agricultural and fish industry discards. In '93, he started the Sonoma countywide yard debris composting program as Sonoma Compost Company, having diverted over 1.8 million tons of organics towards soil amendments. He's currently working as a compost consultant and is a principal in Renewable Sonoma. He's an adjunct compost instructor at Santa Rosa Junior College and serves as the chair of the SRJC Sustainable Agriculture Advisory Committee. Will is a co-founder and current chair of the California Organic Recycling Council and executive board member of the California Compost Coalition. Joining Will is Kelly Schoonmaker. Kelly manages the Compost and Mulch market development and education program at Stop Waste. She develops and delivers training and resources on healthy soil for landscape professionals and works on public policy and issues related to organics management. In a past professional life as a landscape architect, she worked on public and institutional projects throughout California. She's a board member on the California Organics Recycling Council, where she works alongside other public agency staff and composters to ensure the availability and access to quality compost for consumers. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Will and Kelly.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming. Okay, so we're going to start out with soils. Soils have pretty much been taken for granted. Ever since mankind started working the soils, we have been depleting it. You work it, you break up organic matter, and it goes up into the atmosphere. And then when the soil is not productive anymore, we move on to the next one, and so on. So in 2015, the United Nations declared that year the International Year of Soils, realizing that if we do not protect our soils, it actually influences war on our planet, because if a country runs out of fertile soil, they still need to eat. They go to the country next door to exploit the soil out there. So we really need to look at soils and feed the soils. In response to that, and in response to the Marine Carbon Project, Governor Bryan that year declared, or they put into the budget, a line item for soil health. Now that has been underfunded so far, but at least it gets in public awareness right now, is that we need to look at soil health, and that's something that we're going to look at during this presentation here. So I've been doing composting for a long time, a lot of presentations, and when I started doing this here, I usually talked about this list out here, just the benefits of compost, and then go into details of that. As soil health became more popular and people started talking about that, they started also identifying, well, what does soil health bring about for us? And as you can see from this list out here, they are completely parallel. All the benefits that compost brings to the soil is also as defined as what is a healthy soil. What's in the soil? One thing that doesn't change is the mineral particles. That's just there. That's the clay, loam, and silt that's in the soil. That's usually around 45%. Air, 25%, water, 25%. That's under ideal conditions. More rain, less air, less water, more air. That kind of moves back and forth. And then the real dynamic part of the soil is the organic matter. Of the organic matter, 5% is a little bit optimistic. I wish that all soils were at 5%. Easy to get in clay soils, a lot harder to do in sandy soils. But let's, for a round number, use 5%. About 10% of that is soil microorganisms. Another 10% is plant roots. And the other 80% is humus, well-decomposed organic matter that has actually very long life in the soil if left undisturbed. So here are the different parameters that we're going to look at more detail as the role of organic matter in the soil. Soil structure. We cannot change the texture of the soil. So whether you have a clay soil or a sandy soil, you don't really want to mess with that. The best example of that is people that have an adobe soil, a very heavy black clay soil. People hate it when they have that soil. It's like a 5-minute soil, either too wet or too dry. You walk in it when it's wet and you grow taller and taller, it sticks to your shoes. And people that have it goes like, I don't want to see the soil anymore. Brilliant ideas are, well, let's bring in some sand to make it a little lighter. Adobe and sand together dries out is brick. So you don't really want to do that. So soil texture, the best thing you can do with it is actually improve its structure. Leave the soil alone, but improve its structure. And you do that with the addition of organic matter. If you get better soil structure, then that means that the roots can get in easier. You have better water management and a better home for microorganisms. So it's all in tandem out there where good things start to happen. So what is soil aggregation? So we have this example out here. In the soil, if you have clay soil, they're actually leaflets. and they have a positive and a negative charge in it. They can stack together as a magnet and actually create some aggregation, but that's very weak. It does not last very well. Then we can add some organic matter to it that's kind of like a glue to bind it together, and that makes a stronger aggregate. But what really makes a good aggregate is fungi. And the fungi will take their hyphae, wrap it around the aggregate, and that gives you really strong aggregate strength. So that's what we want to foster. Now we can also have aggregate destruction. And that is when we do, for instance, flood irrigation, or you get a lot of rain on a bare soil. And what happens in that case is that the water surrounds the aggregate out here, and there's air inside of it. Through the micropores, air is being sucked in. That is a tremendous strength in which the water is being sucked in, and pressure builds up on the air. Eventually, the aggregate just explodes, and you've lost your structure. So that's why we like to mulch the soil, so that the mulch can absorb the rain and don't surround that aggregate with water right away. Better aggregation gives better soil aeration and better root penetration. So one of the effects of organic matter in soil is nutrient management, and it happens through a lot of different aspects. Microorganisms are responsible for all transformations of nutrients in the soil. So if there are nutrients that are not plant available, the microorganism will transform into a plant available nutrient. So that's one very important part. Second one is cation exchange capacity. What is that? That charge that I talked about before, negative positive charge that clay soils have, it can attract fertilizer in the soil that have a positive charge will be attracted to the negative side of a clay particle. Not all clays do have that. However, organic matter has a very high cation exchange capacity. And so if you build up your organic matter in the soil, then all these nutrients that float around that normally can leach out of your soil can now be conserved by attaching themselves to the sides of these charged particles. And then when an electrical current comes by, it can knock them off and make them plant available again. So that's an exchange that happens. The next that happens is some of these nutrients that float around, when they meet a microorganism, the microorganism all it wants to do is grow, 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 multiply. And so it goes for carbon and nutrients. So it will consume these nutrients that the plants did not get. So it will immobilize these nutrients, get into the body of the microorganism, and as it dies, it becomes plant available again. So that gives it a long-term nutrient release. And then lastly, we have bacteria in there that actually can take nitrogen out of the soil atmosphere and fix it into their bodies as well. And so you get free nitrogen out of the atmosphere. So when we get aggregation of the soil, we get two things happening. In a clay soil, now the clay that normally stacks together now can pack together like boulders, and water can get through it. So you get better infiltration in a clay soil. Sandy soils have actually no water holding capacity, but now if they get surrounded by organic matter is like a sponge, and so you increase the water holding capacity. So both with sandy soils and clay soils, you get an improvement if you build up organic matter. Okay, so here's a heap. That's the beginning of a compost pile, and it's laden with all kinds of organisms. You have macroorganisms in there, microorganisms, bacteria and fungi. As soon as the pile heats up, the macroorganisms will die, and you have just it becomes food for the microorganisms, and then you have the bacteria and fungi in there. But there's a tremendous amount of organisms in there and tremendous diversity. That in finished compost, it can be used as a tool in integrated pest management. How does that work? Apply compost in there, you have an army of micronutrients in there. First, what they do is they keep things clean around the root zone and in the soil. All available carbon will be consumed by your beneficial organism that you have. So a pest comes in, and there's not the smorgasbord out there, it's like that the pest can feed on and multiply. So there's food starvation for the pest, basically. A lot of microorganisms that are there will also feed on your pest. And so there's predation going on. That's also, it's like, hey buddy, this is my room, site occupation. It's like if you have all the sites occupied by a microorganism, another one cannot move into that same site. So all of that combined together gives you some pest management in the soil. And then we already talked about the nutrient management and the fungal presence for aggregation. So difference between compost and mulch. Because a lot of people, it's like they come to my side, I want dirt, and that's for me to figure out, it's like, what do they want right now? So here's a list of how I compare the two. Mulch will always stay in the soil. Do not ever attempt to incorporate mulch into the soil, because it will starve the plants to death. On the other hand, compost, I used to say it's being tilled into the ground. However, with carbon farming, we changed that tune. When you till it in the ground, you may actually destroy old humus in there and actually farm backwards. So it's better to go to a no-till system, which means that you apply the compost to the surface of the soil. So that's on top or below ground. Compost will supply nutrients, virtually zero nutrient addition with the mulch. Compost and mulch will both improve soil structure. They both help in conserving water. Compost will improve the cation exchange capacity, none of that with mulch, and they both will provide erosion control. Yeah, mulch is a high carbon material, and so the microbes want to break down the carbon. That's their main focus in life. So that's the bread and butter. You know, it's like they want to take that in, but they need nutrients for it, and so therefore they take the nitrogen that's in the soil to build the cell structures. They are better at it than plants, and so the plants will have no nutrients left. And yeah. Well, and actually, when it's on the surface layer, it will deplete the surface layer of nitrogen as well, and that provides you the weed control that the mulch has. So what's composting then? Compost is a managed process of decomposition. So we take control over nature's process. So we get a sanitized product at the end that does not have diseases or weed seeds in it anymore, and that provide nutrients to plants that are no phytotoxins in the material as well. So it is important to have then a mature compost that we apply out there to promote soil growth so that it does not have these toxins in it. It also builds carbon better in the soil. How do you know it's a mature compost? Smell it. It should have an earthy smell to it. Feedstock should not be recognizable, so you should not see any leaves in there. You may see little sticks in there because that's high carbon. That is resistant to decomposition, but otherwise you should not recognize what that material was made of anymore. Compost should have cooled off. You should not have an ammonia smell on it anymore. And look for a soil test that shows a carbon-nitrogen ratio of less than 20, and actually I prefer below 17 myself. So, earthworms. That's another type of compost. You turn the earthworms loose in it. Most people actually will, if you want to have a good compost, do that managed composting before you feed it to the earthworms. You take, number one, some of the heat out because the worms don't like the heat. But also you can then do pathogen reduction in it so there are no diseases and no weed seeds in anymore. So first compost, then give it to the worms. And that really provides more growth hormones and more water-soluble nutrients to your plants that really has a very nice effect on plant growth as well. Biochar. People ask me about this here. I've been selling biochar for several years right now. What it is basically you take organic matter that is also decomposed through thermal activity. You heat it up at a high temperature. You exclude oxygen from it so it doesn't burn, does not go to a mineral ash. And then it turns into a charcoal, just like the charcoal that you barbecue with, that kind of a form. It has a very high water holding capacity. It's a hotel for microorganisms, and it has that cation exchange capacity as well. The hotel for microorganisms mean that you need to have some food with there because the microbes cannot eat the biochar. And so if you just add it to the ground and you have no organic matter, it doesn't do anything. It needs organic matter to be functional. Thought this picture is kind of interesting. Here you have the structure, very much the same. There's a tenfold difference in size on this here, but it's a very similar structure built between humus and biochar that's very well designed for water holding capacity and holding mycorrhizae in the soil as well. And Kelly, you're on.
Okay. I liked my little alcove over there. Oh, you can keep that. And I'm going to use it.
You're wired.
Yeah, I'm wired now. I'm wired. Good morning. So I just want to see who's in the room before I start talking about this. Oh yeah, thank you. Oops, sorry, here, I'll take that. I put that in a really bad spot. How many landscape contractors do we have in the room? How about landscape designers? How about landscape architects? How about water agency staff? Okay. I just saw some of you, so I was like. Dust farmers. And dust farmers. Oh, so you have a farm. Okay, and how many farmers? All right, he's your guy. Okay, that's going to help. As Brendan mentioned, I was a landscape architect for a while, and so most of this is based on experience in the urban landscape or in the built landscape. But Ron, that's a bad habit. But Will can talk to you about, certainly talk to you about farming applications. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to first talk about how many of you guys are aware of the Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance. How many of you have done a soil report for the Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance and submitted drawings? Okay, great. Okay, good enough. All right. And then, so we're going to talk a little bit about that, what you need to know for the WELO requirements is, with regard to soil. And then some other applications that are not required by WELO, but are also good uses of compost that some people may not know about. But anyway, the first thing I want to start with is kind of pick up where Will left off and talk about getting a soil test. Who has not, oh wait, no, that's shameful. Who has gotten a soil test? Okay, or ever ordered one. So a lot of times when we're working as designers on a project, we are doing an infill project or something like that. So we actually can't even get to the soil to do the test, and we aren't going to have the same soil that we're going to plant into anyway. So a lot of times that falls to the contractor. But since it seems like most of you guys are like at the design level, like in the first step, you can still have some control over that. Anyway, the WELO requires a soil report, which is great because now you have to get one. And what a soil report is this, the soil analysis, and this, the recommendations. Now, the WELO also requires the use of compost and the use of mulch. To get a recommendation for the use of compost, a quick tip is if you don't order organic recommendations in your soil report, then the soil lab will automatically give you a recommendation for a synthetic fertilizer. They're getting a little bit better about that now. They're kind of learning more about how the WELO is affecting construction and everything, but that is a good tip. Make sure to ask for that, and it's like a really hard box to check. And then a lot of times people have questions about their soil report. Just call. They love talking. I feel like not enough people call them. I feel like they're lonely, and you should call the soil scientist. Anyway, so I'm going to start with composted soil amendment because this is required by the WELO. As I mentioned, it's 4 cubic yards per 1,000 square feet. But they also want you to refer to the soil report if there's different recommendations. And then they check at the end. The city should be checking after construction to make sure that those recommendations were followed. And so anyway, 4 cubic yards, but you also want to make sure to follow the soil report. So the things to think about when you are speccing compost for a soil amendment is that you're getting the right compost, right? So I'm going to pass around a couple samples. Usually one thing that, did I really not bring that one? What's this one? Oh, this will do. Oh, this has biochar in it. This is the fancy stuff. So I'm going to pass these 2 around, and you can go ahead and smell them. This is screened to a 1/4 inch, but usually you can get, if it's up to a 1/2 inch, that's fine. I'm sorry for feedbacking. Oh, no, that's it, those 2. I'm going to hand them out as I go. And then the feedstock. What if you're doing a bay-friendly rated project? Who's worked on a bay-friendly rated project? Peter, okay. Oh, that's right, Scott. And then, yeah, okay, so great. So if you're doing that, you know you need to do organic compost. And what that means, it's what feedstock it comes from. So compost can be made from a variety of materials. For organic feedstock, it's regulated at the federal level by the National Organic Program, and it can be green waste, food waste, ag waste, and manure. Am I leaving anything out? I don't think so. Just know it can't be biosolids based or MSW based, and MSW stands for mixed solid waste, which equals garbage. So yeah, why would you want that? No offense to the MSW compost producers, but anyway. And then, as we mentioned, you want to make sure it's mature. Now, when you think about how you incorporate it, so typically we think we would, typically we would, till it into 6 inches. And the reason it's 6 inches is because that's what the equipment comes in. It's the most easy thing to do. And so the 4 cubic yards per 1,000 square feet is also based on incorporating the compost to a depth of 6 inches. But so here's a picture of some compost incorporated, and this is actually to 9 inches. But you can see if you were going to incorporate it deeper, you would be diluting that compost. So you would want to increase your application rate the deeper you incorporate. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. And then as Will mentioned, you can surface apply, and this is good if you've got like existing trees or I've never had this experience of having soil ever on a project, but let's say you had a green field that had existing soil structure that was healthy, you might surface apply it instead. And then if you've got a really compacted site, like it's been a staging area, which happens to a lot of people, then you might consider bringing in a chisel plow or some kind of ripper that can rip it even deeper, 18 to 36, to get you better drainage. And that has been shown, actually, we get a lot of questions about compost in native plants, which I'm happy to discuss later, but that's been shown to be really effective for establishing native plants, the deep rip with the incorporation of medium compost, which I'll pass around. Here you go. And without irrigation, without supplemental irrigation. So, all right. Next, mulch. This is also a requirement. You're required to use 3 inches. This had been a requirement in the previous version of the ordinance, but only 2 inches, which we know just goes away in like a week and a half. So 3 inches now required. And the other thing people are sort of, they get confused about is there's also sort of a requirement. It says recycled, locally sourced mulch from organic materials shall be given preference if it's available, or if it's a recycled mulch if it's available locally. It is really available locally, and I'll show you what some examples of those are. But a lot of people aren't aware that where to find it, and so that's been a big barrier. But it's very easy to find, and it's really good mulch. And again, when you're speccing it, of course, you want to think about what soil you've got, what plants you've got, and also, like, for your thing about 3 inches is the minimum required, but what if you're working on a highway project and you know that they're not going to get, the maintenance crew isn't going to get out there for like 2 or 3 years? You might consider doing 6 inches, and that's what Caltrans does for that reason. So anyway, and of course, appearance, right? That comes down to that. So here's some examples of what is considered recycled mulch. So we've got tree trimmings, aged tree trimmings, and then the fresh stuff that you would get from like if a arborist or tree trimmer dropped it off, and then you'd age it and it would become that. And then another common one we see is the pallet mulch that has a colorant on it that's safe, although you don't want to store it right on concrete because a lot of times that color can leach and it often fades over time. But anyway, another one that people like. And then these 3 are actually Will's. Really, these are beautiful composts. So, and one you'll notice here is, oh, this is Compost and Mulch. And I have a sample of this. So,
Funky mulch.
I love this. This is my favorite mulch. I know that I have a favorite mulch is kind of weird, but I keep skipping you. I'm sorry. But okay. Yeah, it is amazing mulch. I use it in my yard. Question. Oh, we can talk about that. Will, do you have a price sheet or anything?
It's online. I'm not a salesperson. I make stuff. I think it runs maybe about $12 a cubic yard.
Yeah. So if that's, and this is the, okay.
Wait, the question was how much the mulch runs, and
that's this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's about $12 a cubic yard, but either go to sonomacompost.com or westmarinecompost.com, and all the pricings are there. Now,
right, and I would say that it can range depending on how much you're getting and what you're getting, anywhere from as low as like $8 up here to maybe $30 a yard. So it depends. Like mostly I see this stuff at around 25 or 30. These things, depending on where you get it and how much you get, is anywhere 8 to 25. And then, and Will, your stuff ranges same, right? 8 to 25, about 30.
The mulches stop at $18 a cubic yard. I think vineyard mulch is the most expensive, and then the compost starts at 20, and the biochar compost going around is $45 because biochar is expensive.
Yeah, biochar is like $100 a yard or something.
More than that. Okay,
more than that. All right, so those are that's what we call recycled stuff. And if you want to find a list of other people that provide this kind of mulch, there are resources at the end, and I'll show you. We have a list of those providers in the Bay Area. Here's what we've also seen, right? Shredded redwood or gorilla hair and just bark, right? So these are not what we would consider. These are virgin materials. They're forest industry byproducts, but they're not considered recycled mulches. So there you go. Also, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like they're starting, like this is like 1978 to 82, and this looks like maybe, I don't know, 1995. So maybe if you're feeling retro, but it's not going to comply with the ordinance.
And some people have banned gorilla hair because of fire hazard.
I was going to, and you always want to check regarding gorilla hair or any mulch you use what the local fire code is, and so that's going to vary county to county and region to region. Peter? Oh, right. So the question Peter is raising is that there's some toxicity issues, just for the recording, with pets. And so redwood being toxic to dogs, I should keep my dogs from chewing on it, but, well, they seem fine so far. And then, but definitely the, like, cocoa hulls people use, and you know, that's another toxic one. Okay. So the next thing is is sheet mulching. So how many of you guys know what sheet mulching is? Oh my gosh, that's so great. Okay, so we'll skip through this, but this what I will tell you, just to bring it up to speed, it's a layered system of weed control, soil amendment, and mulching. But it also, this recipe of the cardboard plus 1.5 inches of compost and 3 inches of mulch meets the WELO spec. So if you have a project that is having to comply with WELO and you're thinking about sheet mulching, if you use this spec, it'll be fine. And for those of you who've never seen it, here's what you do. You lay down cardboard. You can see the grass is still there. You can use this to convert a lawn, or you can use it just as regular soil prep. A lot of people do that. And so this cardboard replaces any kind of like woven or non-woven weed barrier. Then you wet it down. Then you put the compost on it. Then you put the mulch on top of that. And then for smaller plants, 1 gallon and smaller, you can go ahead and dig a hole straight into the matrix and plant into it. And it works at a variety of scales, as you can see, from like home gardener to big. In the first photo? Yeah. Oh, no, you don't. Nope, don't need to. So that's just turf right there. We haven't pulled out the turf. And one of the benefits of this is, well, okay, where does turf go when you rip it out? Good job, Robin. I wish I had prizes. Turf goes to landfill. A lot, you would think, right? It's organic. Why does it go to the composting facility? Well, it doesn't go to the composting facility because when you rip out turf, you get the soil and the grit with it, and that soil and grit destroys equipment. So it'll break a tooth on a grinder, or can do these things that shuts down the line. They have to replace it. It causes a lot of problems. So most composters don't accept it. So what it does by doing this method, you also are avoiding per acre about 87 tons of sod going to landfill and making methane and ruining our lives. Oh, yeah, the sod netting, too. And then sometimes there's sod netting. That's a good point. Okay, back to this beautiful photo. It's a bay-friendly rated project. Okay. Now, these next things I'm going to talk about, erosion and sediment control practices, are not required by WELO. However, you can use them to comply with, do any of you prepare SWPs, stormwater pollution prevention plans for projects? Well, you should. Take it away from the engineers. Oh, wait, how many engineers are in here? Okay, sorry. Okay, that's good to know, though, before I start. Wait, how many architects are in here? Okay, good to know. All right, so if any of you are preparing these stormwater pollution prevention plans or working with an engineer or other consultant who's preparing one, you should be aware of this. Okay, so compost blankets, berms, and socks basically replace, can you use where a bonded fiber matrix or a straw blanket could be used for compost, or a silt fence or a straw wattle for the berms and socks. I'll start with the blankets first. So if any of you were here a few years ago, you've seen this slide already if you went to this talk. This is a project done in Caltrans. But basically, as you can see, here, let me back up. You can see the compost blankets can be blown on. They can also, if you have a accessible and short enough, if you have an accessible slope, you could also use just a loader and that kind of equipment to move it around. But it's basically 1.5 inches. It's like a thin layer of composted mulch, of the chunky mulch on the slope, and it just holds it right there. It works really well because it knits to the ground and it keeps the water from going under the ground. It also prevents the impact from the rain that Will was talking about. So they had this really cool opportunity. This is a Caltrans project in Prunedale where they could they kind of ran out of material, and so they ended up doing some compost and some bonded fiber matrix. So they had all of these different erosion control strategies in one place. Then they installed it all, and it rained. Like, it dumped. 2 inches came in. So it was like this perfect magical, it was literally a perfect storm. That's great. So anyway, on this side, that's where they used, underneath this is a compost blanket with a bonded fiber matrix on top. And this is just bonded fiber matrix. So you can see when it comes to preventing rain, like there's all this sediment down here, there's nothing down here. So it's really holding, and it's not only holding the soil in place, it's holding the bonded fiber matrix in place, which is nice. And then to talk about the berms a little bit, this is the same project. So you can see you've got, like, in this case, they had some jute netting because they were trying another strategy, jute netting with compost blanket, and they did get a little sediment here. But what they did was, this is a really long slope. They put in these little berms of compost and to trap the sediment. And then you can see they just kind of blend in. They don't take them out or anything. They can seed over them, or they can seed into them when they install. And then, so the things you need to think about are just how long is your slope, how steep is your slope, and then that's going to tell you how big your berm needs to be and how far apart they need to be. The last one, compost socks. So here's an example of a compost sock being used for sediment control. So both the berms and the socks, less erosion control, more sediment control. So it's the same idea. It's like the berm, only it's like the berm has been stuck in a stocking, right? And the stocking materials vary. There's plastic ones and non-plastic ones, fiber ones, all kinds. But anyway, what you do is you can kind of lay them out. In this case, it's to protect to drain. They can also use it in the same way they've used the compost berms and in swales and as check dams. They can use it as a lot of different things. And what's nice is it's easy to install. Like, you wouldn't be able to use a compost berm here, right? Because it's right next to this drain. And but you can put a sock there and then pull it up later and put the compost somewhere and take your sock away. So. And one of the reasons, I should say, why these things work, because you can see, like, the performance here for the compost sock versus like straw bales or wattles or just plain mulch, the performance is much better, right? One of the reasons is you've got, if that chunky mulch went around, you've got the large woody fraction, and you've got compost fines. And what happens is the compost fines grab all the really fine sediment, and the really fine sediment is what the heavy metals attach to and phosphorus attaches to. That's what all your pollutants attach to, are these little fine particles. And the problem with straw wattles, right, they have big holes, so that gets through. Even a silt fence, those particles are so fine that they go right through the fence. So. Okay, so carbon farm planning. I'm going to hand it back over to Will. We can talk about it a little bit later. Our agency is actually doing one of these projects, but we haven't started yet. But Will has been really involved, so I'll let him go.
Yes, and we want to leave some time for discussion as well, so I'm going to go quick here. So with carbon farming, basically the premise that we have is that if we have a focus of incorporating carbon in the soil and deal with the soil, that all we want to do is raise the carbon levels, everything else will fall in place. So we don't care anymore about, it's like looking at the health of your plants and stuff like that. If you have good soil, everything else will be healthy on top of it. So your main focus is anymore just on getting carbon into the soil.
Oh, here.
Yeah.
I took it, sorry.
Thank you. So it's a very simple concept. Sun is shining, having energy out there. The trees pick up, plants pick up the solar energy and convert it into simple sugars. When the plant material dies, it sheds off, goes into the ground. You also have animals that will eat some of the plant material, and they poop down, it gets into the ground. Microorganisms in here, they eat the material, and they die and goes into the ground. And so we build up organic matter in the soil. And by having the correct soil management, like no-till, using mature compost, we can over time build up the organic matter. And the goal is that we're going to build up by several percentage points all organic matter in the soil throughout the world. And if we can do that, we can actually reverse global warming. We're talking a lot about, well, we need to slow things down, green energy. Well, all that does is, it's like we're on a trajectory of getting more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but it goes less steep, but it's still increasing. We need to nosedive down. And this is actually a mechanism that we can use to actually take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and put it back into the soil. So things that we do to get that accomplished is never leave a soil uncovered. That means, like this is farm in Sebastopol, for instance. He raises organic matter from 1.5% to 6 to 8%. He gets 5 crop rotations per year, uses 20% of the water that his neighboring farmers are using, and he grows about $100,000 per year. None of his neighboring farmers are doing that. He uses this here. If he doesn't plant in that soil, he puts a felt-like material on the surface of the soil. But mostly, when he harvests, crop comes out, and in the afternoon, a new crop is in already. So always keep it planted. Use low or no-till. Make wise use of compost. He actually used, in my opinion, too much compost. If everyone did it the way he did it, we would not have enough compost to go around. Use mature compost. have soil tests done to get a baseline, and then keep track of your carbon levels to see them build up. Did you do this slide already? No. So what you want to look at is, what's the material made from? Sometimes your customers will say it's like, well, I just want to have compost of vegetated material only. Well, that means that you want to have like yard debris compost or something like that. But some people say, I want to have manure. It has to be cow manure because it has to have gone through the digestive system of the cow, and they prefer that. Some people say, I don't want to have food scraps in it because it has meat in it, and I'm a vegetarian. I don't want to support that. Biosolids is something else like that. You can never grow organic food on soil where you apply biosolids. It's against the law. So those are things that you need to take into account when you select your compost. You want to make sure that it was composted aerobically. You see right now some anaerobic digestion is coming online. The compost or the digestate that comes out of there has all the nutrients in the wrong form. All the microorganisms are the wrong microorganisms. So, it's like you want to have something that has been aerobically composted. Did it mean pathogen reduction? So you want to have a material that is disease and weed free. That arbor mulch, for instance, that the tree trimmers do, it can have diseases on it. You have no idea what comes with it. It's like, to me, when I get the material, it will all go, even if it's a mulch, it will go through a pathogen reduction phase, which means 131 degrees for at least 15 days, during which time we turn the material 5 times. Does it pass the metals limit? We have to do tests for that as a commercial composter. Take a look at those. Look at maturity. It's like, will it actually promote healthy plant growth? There are lab tests that actually will reflect that as well. What kind of particle size do you need for your particular use? Sometimes you can use a coarser compost, sometimes you want to have a finer compost. Contaminants. This year a new law passed on minimum the maximum contaminant rate we can have in soil amendments. So a lot of things to look at how you evaluate what kind of compost you're going to take. There are all kinds of certifications out there. OMRI, a lot of people ask for OMRI. OMRI is no longer valid in California. If you have a soil amendment that is listed as organic, it has to be approved by the California Department of Food and Agriculture. I also used to make biodynamic compost, and Demeter certifies that. If you do biodynamic compost, it has to be CDFA approved in order to sell biodynamic compost in California as well. Then there's the US Composting Council Seal of Testing Assurance Program. That's a national program that also has certain standards of disclosure that you need to show to your customer. Just like, here's what my compost represents. And then, compare your test results for specifications. And I'm going to go to you here.
Okay. Oh, I've got this.
Got that.
Can I have that?
You want it?
Yeah.
So I knew you want something.
I want something, yeah. Okay, so one of the things about this is a good starting point. Like, if you don't, your compost should participate in probably one of these. Well, it doesn't have to, but if it does, that it's already been checked by someone else, that it has a permit, and it's an operating composting facility and not another facility that's not actually composting and permitted, which is less of a problem these days, but it used to be a bigger issue. And then I just want to say one thing about seal of testing assurance. What this does is that used to be the compost testing lab could be tested in a variety of different ways and give a variety of different results. So if your specs were assuming one sort of test, but they tested a different way, it would be off. So what this does, it allows you to compare the two on the same levels playing field. So I don't want to say it, but it's apples to apples. Anyway, okay. So when you're specifying stuff, what you want to think about is how are you going to use it? What can you control? As Will mentioned, there's particle size and maturity, the type of feedstock, and also to a certain extent the installation method that could be variable. And then there's some things that you just always want to have, right? It needs to be compost. It shouldn't be digestate. It should be, it always has to go through pathogen reduction, that kind of thing. And then you want to follow that up by being really clear in your construction documents, or to you, the contractor, at least in your communication, right? Whatever that is. So if you have a standard spec your office uses, you want to make sure and update that with the compost and mulch requirements. And also your details, make sure those are all in agreement. And the other thing we always see people do is they do that part, but then they forget that there's this relic plant tab in their detail, and they need to kind of take the synthetic recommendations out because that's confusing. And then during construction, if you can, actually in your submittals, you can do this in specifications, that data sheet, these data sheets right here, you're never going to get a data sheet that's the compost that you're going to see on site, right? Because that's the time lag, right? So what you can do, though, to make sure you've got consistent product over time is ask for the last 6. They have to get these tested regularly, and that gives you the last year or so. anyway, so you can compare those two things. And then ask for, a lot of times we ask for a sample this size. Ask for a gallon. You can see a lot more in a gallon than you can in a quart, whatever that is. And let's see, and then if you can, this is hard for people sometimes, but be on site for delivery and look at the compost while it's still in the truck. Because once it's on the ground, it's a lot harder to pick up and send back. And then, of course, visit composting facilities. You can see how they ran their operations, and you can see how they do their, and you can build that relationship. So that's, and I think composters, some composters like Will. What? Oh, yeah, they're lonely out there. And there's cheese right down the street in Nicasio. So anyways, but they know a lot. They can tell you a lot. So anyway, if you want to learn more about this, Stop Waste does do lunch and learns with various contractors to really get into more depth on compost and its applications and everything about it. There's also Bay-friendly design training. Go to Rescape to look for that. And then if anyone is interested in learning more about the Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, Stop Waste and PG&E do an annual now training, one-day workshop on that. And then these slides will be available online. So here's all your lists of things. Yep, there it is. Thanks. That was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. Sorry, everybody.
We're going to go to our table.
Are we good? Sure.
All right, so we're entering to a Q&A portion here. Anybody have questions for our presenters? We're recording this session. That's why I want to make sure everybody speaks into the mic.
Will, so this is a question for you, Will, over here.
Where are you?
Wait, right back here.
Oh, there.
Here I am.
Hi.
Yeah, so what is a good percentage of compost or organic matter in the soil? You said 5%, you said the farmer used 8%. I kind of try to target 5.
Yeah, 5 is a good target number, but I tell you,
clay, it's all clay.
Yeah, with a clay soil you can do it. If you have a sandy soil, you will never reach that because the rate of decomposition in the sandy soil is so rapid. It's like having soil in the tropics; it oxidizes off in no time.
So now I have to ask. So sandy soil, what's a good recommendation?
Building up in organic matter in sandy soil is really biochar, but there's still a lot that we need to learn about biochar. But biochar will last even in a sandy soil for hundreds of years. Yeah, but it's expensive, and you still need to reintroduce compost with it because by itself, biochar is a sterile product. And so to create life and so on, that's what it's all about, is, it's like creating life. You still need to add organic matter that's alive.
I just want to add, it also depends on what you're growing. So if you're growing drought-tolerant native Californian or Mediterranean plants, they're adapted to less organic matter than if you were in some riparian area. So don't forget about the plants and also what you're starting with. You may not be able to get to 5 in one shot if you're starting with like a construction site.
I work on a sustainability team for a large company here in the Bay Area, and I visited a compost facility, and I found it really interesting that the compost yard actually told us, hey, stop using these compostable bags with your compost. Please put them in recycle plastic bags. And I sort of was doing more investigation about that and came to learn that potentially there's different types of composting, industrial composting, which introduces heat for sort of speeding up the acceleration of said composting, or there's organic composting. So if you could sort of address that and maybe the greenwashing of composting.
Yeah, I'm probably the most outspoken composter in the United States warning about compostable plastics. Because I do think it's overall a greenwashing. Number one, if you have an organic compost, it's an oxymoron. Compostable plastics are a synthetic, and they are not allowed in the National Organics Program. So if you have a organic compost and those people say that they recycle compostable plastics, they're either lying or they goes to the landfill still, they pick it out, or they're making a compost that actually does not qualify the National Organics Program. Problems with compostable plastics, in my opinion, is number one, yes, it's not NOP. Number two, it looks just like plastic. So if I tell my people that I want to have a clean compost to pick out the plastics, they can't tell the difference between the two. It looks exactly the same. The third one is that not all of them do actually fully decompose during the composting process. And lastly, it is most of the compostable plastic. People think corn, it's like nice and green plant material. You cannot find plant-derived compostable plastics anymore. It's like it's all part or 100% petrochemical. So that's my little take on that. If you go to the sonomacompost.com website, there's a little link on the homepage out there to my article on pitfalls of compostable plastics.
And just to address your question on do you introduce heat to the composting process itself generates heat. And so if you have there's hot composting, there's backyard, right, where you keep adding slow, and that's more of a cold composting system. But in something like Will does or any commercial composter, anywhere that we're sending our food scraps, they're all generating heat, and part of that is to reduce the pathogens and everything. So
and it's required by regulations.
Or not, they all have to do that.
Yeah.
There's some target optimum temperatures.
It has to be a minimum of 131 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, the compostable plastic industry makes all kinds of arguments. You're not hot enough, you're too cool, it's like whatever. They did not do really their research for a compost system. They developed it in the laboratory, and compostable plastics were really not designed to be green, but they had too much corn and found a use for it.
And the other thing I would say is just don't put any plastic in your green bin, even if you think it might be compostable, just throw it out. And don't put it, if you don't know, just throw it in the trash. We used to say, oh, if you don't know, be an aspirational recycler or composter, and they'll figure it out. But now we've realized that's caused a lot of problems with contamination in recycling markets of all kinds, organics and just and plastics.
Right.
So, just throw it out, and that's the best thing. That's the best thing that you can do for that's the best move.
We had lots of other questions still.
Yep.
Hi. I have a question about the unscreened mulch or unscreened compost, using that as mulch. What is your experience with using that as compost? So at the Presidio Trust, we generate all our own compost. We have so much of it, but we don't have time to screen it as much as we need it.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about using unscreened kind of larger chunks of cooked?
And I think you mentioned that it's part of leaving it on the surface of the soil. Did you mean the unscreened compost? Did you mean the chunky mulch? Unscreened compost?
No, I meant the chunky mulch was actually screened to an inch and a half. It's just the larger fraction.
Yeah. So here's what I say. If you have a question specifically about unscreened compost, commercially you got to be very careful for that, because one of the reasons that a compost facility screens the material is to make you happy, so it has uniform particle size. The other reason is that whatever comes out on the other end of the screen, the overs, has all the contaminants in it as well that went through the composting process. So you have unscreened compost, and you may have pieces of plastic, glass, metal, all kinds of other stuff coming with it that is screened out. And so, like West Marine Compost, we don't really use any green can material. Two well-trained communities, Bolinas and Stinson, we get some of their material, and it still has a little bit of contaminant in it, but overall it's a very, very clean facility. The chunky mulch, what did you pull out of there? About half a sandwich bag out of 16 cubic yards of contaminant?
Sorry, it was half a bread bag, sorry. I wish it was a sandwich bag, but it was very, very little.
Yeah, but so it's very hard to get clean material. Even agriculture material, they have wire in there. They, it's like even the workers, it's like they pull stuff down. It's like we do not live in a very clean society. People do not think through the respect of organic matter, the way I call it. It's like that you treat that material with respect and keep it in a virgin condition, and we need to work on that. But I did want to say something else about it, and then we'll go to the next question. So if you have if you have unscreened compost, now you have that high carbon material. I actually like that if you had a full composting process. So all your easily carbon has been stripped off. The microbes have consumed that already, and the carbon that's there right now is actually resistant to decomposition, but still a great host for fungi. And so you get good fungal growth out there, yet you don't really deplete the soil. So I actually like that carbon in there, but you don't see it much because of that contaminant issue. Okay.
Okay, yeah, hi. Will was talking about applying compost to the surface, and he talked a lot about, no-till ways of applying the compost. And Kelly was talking about the idea of maybe rototilling or ripping and incorporating the compost deeper into the soil. Yeah. And I'm I'm kind of guessing one is maybe more agriculture and one is more
No.
urban.
I'll give a first response to it, and then
Yeah.
Kelly can follow up on it.
Sure.
Kelly did mention is like that most of the soils that she encounters is those that she saw some soil, because if you go to a landscape, new development or something like that, the soil has been scraped off. You got nothing there. You got a subsoil there. If you have a subsoil there that is not already in good, you don't have a soil that's in good condition, you got to do something to that soil. You got to rip it, you got to loosen it up, and you got to incorporate the compost into the soil. That's what you have to start with, because else it will take too long to improve that soil. So really amend the hell out of that soil. Really get a good amount of organic matter built up into that, and then thereafter you can do a top feed with it, where you just put the compost on the top of it. You do get evolution of nitrogen and other nutrients out of that compost, so that's why I prefer the mulch on top of it, because the mulch now will serve as a filter, say, for these gases that come off the compost, so that these nitrogen compounds do not get in the atmosphere. It will be picked up by the mulch. So that's why it's like compost mulch is a really good effect, and that will then really continue to build that soil underneath it. Rototill it, yeah.
I wouldn't rototill it. But some
It depends on what people have
depends what
available.
you start with.
Yeah. It's like I think chiseling soil is a lot better. The less disturbance you have is better, but people also use what they have available, right? But it's like, but there's no organic matter. If you have a subsoil, there's no organic matter to destroy. It's like all you have is massive, layer that has accumulations of clay in there. Yeah. It's like you need to get the organic matter in there, the soil organism in there, so that they can get to work to start aggregating and building that soil structure.
And the advantage of going deeper and like doing that chisel where you're just ripping the soil, as opposed to kind of rototilling, which is usually kind of in the top
and
layer,
create a hard pan underneath it.
Is exactly that. You end up creating a hard pan. The idea is you got to get water down in there, and that's one of the ways that you create soil structure is like through the water retention or holding capacity.
This may be along the same lines, but you said to leave compost on top. If you've got tree roots down below, you obviously need to remove some of those first. And at that point, would you incorporate the compost at least that first time, and then put the compost on, just leave it on the surface after that?
Can I ask a clarifying question? In this situation, do you have a tree attached to those tree roots?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
2 feet away, 100-year-old black walnut in neighbor's yard. Allelopathic roots.
Well, yeah, I was like, nothing's going to grow in there. Oh, so I see. So the tree, you're not trying to preserve the tree. You're trying to plant.
I'm trying to get out some of the roots, enough roots so the plants will grow. And then, the compost goes on twice a year. So additional layers of compost would just go on the top?
Good, but I would say if you're removing roots, like that's a really good time. Anytime you disturb the soil.
If you disturb the soil anyway, may as well incorporate the organic matter in it. And then there's like the growth inhibitor that your plants have. That's called the allelopathic effect that's out there. Your microbes actually will break down that component. So after a while, those are breaking down, because that's just a carbon chain. It's like, and the microbes see that as food. Yeah.
Any other questions?
You had a question.
You had a question.
Yeah. You will get it. They will post it, and you get an email that they have been posted. In the back. That's probably the last question, or? A few more. Okay.
What's a good source to find out more about carbon farming?
Oh.
Yes.
You can put that on there. Carbon cycle?
There is the Carbon Cycle Institute. They're based in Petaluma. They have a website. Also, I think if you Google the Marin Carbon Project, there will be a lot of information on that.
Yeah. And both of those sites have links to the research papers that where they discovered this or proved this phenomenon.
Yeah, and what's the website again? It escapes me now. That has the carbon farming videos on it.
Which ones?
Yeah. Maybe we can add that to the slide.
Yeah, we can add some.
There are two videos actually, one based on soil and one on compost, that talks about the carbon farming, and we'll add that to the references. And we'll add the Carbon Cycle Institute, and we'll add the Marine Carbon Project to it as well. Also, the RCDs have a lot, the Resource Conservation Districts. have a lot of information on this here. They develop for farming. Any farmers out here that are interested in it, RCDs will develop and implement carbon farming plans for farms and also for vineyards.
And I don't know if there's any farmers from Alameda County right now, or I think actually we're only doing rangeland, but anyway, they're looking for a potential partner right now to develop a plan.
Okay. Other questions?
More? Well, thank you very much, Will and Kelly, for a great presentation. And again, if you all missed it, we will be sending out the presentations after the event.